So we are talking about envisioning the future for the Gordy Jolma Family Natural Area. And my name is Evelyn Ives. I'm a capital project manager, the Parks and Nature Division of Clark County. And this project is a partnership between Clark County and the Cowlitz Indian Tribe. I have a couple of representatives from their Habitat Restoration Department here today. We also have two of our consultants on this project, Interblue and Greenworks, who will be presenting with me. Before we get started, I wanted to do some introductions. So tonight, I have lost track of most of the parks folks, but I'm going to introduce them anyways. So Danielle Cowley is with Clark County. She's way over there. She's part of our Legacy Lands program. No applause necessary. Thank you. David Stipe is out on the porch now. He's the Planning and Development Manager. Ross Hoover is our Parks Division Manager. Thanks, Ross. Justin Isle is with the Cowlitz Indian Tribe, and Pete Barber is also in his group. And I think we might be outside. We also have Chair Marshall with us today. There she is, thank you. So yeah, she's from District 5, which is your district. Thanks for being here tonight. Battleground Mayor Troy McKay is also here. Sorry, can't read my writing. McCoy, thank you. And then we have a few members from the Parks Advisory Board. You guys can wave your hand. Teresa Meyer, Jim Kautz, and Janice Van Wyhe. And then also here is Emily Hess from our Clean Water Commission. Thanks for. All right. Welcome to our online participants. Just a few notes. You will be muted the whole time, but if you have any issues or questions, please put that into the chat and we will get back to you as soon as we can. We are going to hold most of the questions until the very end of the presentation. So, try to hold on to your questions, or you can write them down on the comment card that hopefully you received at the entrance table tonight. So why are we here? Well, the county bought this old golf course a few years ago, and it was purchased with conservation dollars. So this is happening in a lot of municipalities where golf courses are unable to continue functioning. And so, the community sees an opportunity to purchase that land, use it for conservation, and a lot of places call it rewilding a golf course. So we're going to talk about those opportunities that we see tonight. We're going to talk about some of the constraints that come along with that goal. But really what we're here for is to kick off a process that is pretty malleable, open to discussion. It's part of a feedback process. We're bringing a lot of information that we've gathered over the last year to you because we want you to be informed. And then we want to hear from you. We want to hear how you use the site, how you'd like to use the site, and ideas that you have on how we can improve this great asset. So here's a vicinity map. It's centered on Salmon Creek because Salmon Creek runs through the property. So Gordy Jolma is way over here on the right side of the map in yellow. And the other key feature here is the railroad track that runs from Vancouver all the way up through our site and it goes all the way up to Yapple. That's just a distinctive way to cut our property in half. All right, so like I mentioned, this was purchased with Legacy Lands funds. Legacy Lands is a conservation program that the county has, they've been conserving lands since 1985. This is run through tax dollars, and over that time, we've conserved more than 5,000 acres along the county's most scenic rivers, lakes, and other waterways. So what makes Gordy Jolma legacy lands? It has high conservation value. It's 118 acres along Salmon Creek, 2.2 miles of habitat for endangered species within the waterway itself. And it's also bordered by Salmon Morgan Natural Area, which is an additional 108 acres of completely conserved land. And it's got a lot of potential for passive recreation because of that golf course infrastructure. So what do I mean by passive recreation? We're talking about trails for walking, hiking, biking, and rolling, on-leash dog walking, trailheads, parking, restrooms, and neighborhood access points, lots of public open space. Passive recreation is not sports courts, it's not mountain biking, skate parks, golf courses, no off-leash dog areas, and we have to keep this an open space, not for private access. So what's in a name? So as you can imagine, the name Salmon Creek comes from the species that once packed the riverbed. But we've lost a lot of salmon all over the state and up the West Coast. And today, many salmon populations are listed as threatened or endangered. So many of you might know, Washington State and tribal nations have prioritized building back and improving habitat to bring our fish back. The state provides Salmon Recovery Funding Board money. This is grant funding, and the Cowlitz tribe received grant funding to come up with preliminary ideas and assessment of this property. So part of the reason they were successful in getting this grant is because Salmon Creek is small but mighty for coho populations. Specifically, the spawning ground is kind of perfect for them. So this chart shows current levels of coho spawning. Salmon Creek is on the left here, and then on the right, the East Fork Lewis River and the Washougal River, which are two much larger systems. And you can see some of the years, Salmon Creek actually outperforms these larger rivers. So even though these numbers are large, they're only a fraction of the salmon that used to run in this river. So just keep that in mind. I forgot to mention, in addition to legacy lands funds, the county used clean water funds to help with the purchase of this former golf course. So the top three goals here are all sort of conservation focused: clean water, salmon recovery, restoration of native species. That means native plants. The more native plants we can bring in, the less noxious weeds and invasive weeds will have room to grow, right? So, and then the last two project goals are about public access. We want reasonable and safe public access. We want to improve the trails. We want to improve creek crossings. All right, I'm going to pass it off to Emily Alcott. She's with Interfluve, and she's going to talk to you about fish.
Thanks, Evelyn. I am Emily Alcott, and I'm here to talk to you about Salmon Creek, which flows through Gordy, Jolma Natural Area, what it was like historically, how it's changed, and what are some opportunities of some tools in the toolbox we can use to restore Salmon Creek connectivity, and that ecological connectivity can be the foundation for this recreational connectivity, social connectivity that Evelyn and Grayson are going to talk more about after me. So what did Salmon Creek look like historically? Well, we weren't here thousands of years ago, we don't know. But we have some clues on the landscape that we can use to give us a pretty good idea of what it did look like. So we can use these clues. What's the watershed like? What's the valley like? To give us a close, so we can close our eyes and get that good picture of what it might have been like and why it got named Salmon Creek. Okay, before I jump into this first map, I'm gonna do a little orientation because I'm gonna show the same view a few times. So this is, if you zoom in from the context map that Evelyn showed, we've got Salmon Creek. The current day alignment is shown in the light blue line, and then flow is from right to left on the screen. All right, and about at the midpoint of the property, we've got the railroad trestle, and you can see it bumped up on here. As an aside, this map, if you don't know, it's called LiDAR, which is really cool. So it shows you what the ground surface is like if vegetation is not there. So it's kind of like a window below the vegetation. So you can see that railroad trestle bump up in this LiDAR map. Next thing, at the downstream end, we've got 142nd Avenue Bridge. We've got San Gordy Creek's natural area, which is adjacent to this property, which Evelyn mentioned. And then upstream and boundary is approximately 167th Avenue. So just map orientation. All right, so the river valley is wide. What do I mean by the river valley? These dotted black lines, which are the outside, are basically like the bumpers which contain the river. So if any of you go bowling, and you might, like myself, be a horrible bowler and use those bumpers in the bowling alley, and the ball like bounces back and forth between those, that's exactly what these dashed lines did for the river. So it could bounce back and forth between those. So we've got those bumpers outlined, and those will show up on a few different maps, so we can remember it. So, and we do know that it bounced back and forth because if you look at this dashed blue line, that is the alignment in the late 1800s. So the river was way on the other side of the valley, and historically would move back and forth across between those bumpers. All right, the second clue we can use beyond the big river valley is that it's depositional. So what do we mean by depositional? We mean it's kind of a low gradient. It's like you can barely notice it's going downhill. And so we dug some test pits, just got this excavator out and dug some holes. And then if you look deep in the hole, you can see below this white line, there's kind of this black mucky looking dirt. So that is indicative that it was a wetland and pretty swampy. So we know that there was a lot of water going up and down, and that would have been pretty swampy probably historically. So that's one thing he's telling us. And if we look a little closer, zoom in further, we can also see that these are cobbles and gravels, where they're about the size of a softball or a tennis ball. And so what did that mean? Is those were way at the bottom, and as that river was meandering between those bumpers, it would make some of those things come out of the riverbanks, then it would drop it down for salmon. And that is what salmon like to spawn in and build their redds in, or their nests. So we'll talk about that a little more later as well. Okay, next clue, the third clue we can use. So we got the wide valley, we have its depositional, and we have that it is forested. So you can see here's an aerial, same view in the 1950s. You can see a lot of trees, a lot more than are there today. But you can see a lot of clearing has already occurred because we have these really convenient grid-like patterns. So good for agriculture. And that forested, a lot of that vegetation in forest landscape was great for the river because as the river came up out of its banks and spilled out onto the bench, it would really slow the river down. It would hold the stream banks together, and then those would fall in to the river, make a log jam like this one. And those then cause the river to bounce around more between those bumpers and would build these kind of cool little islands like the one you show here. And we think that there was a lot of these log jams because if you go upstream, Evelyn's going to highlight this later, there's a section of the property that's really forested, and there's a lot of log jams. This is my colleague Caleb, and he's 6'4". He's holding his hand up, so they were also really tall and impressive. Okay, so we've got our three ingredients. We've got wide valley, depositional, and forested. So close your eyes. What kind of river does that look like? Maybe nothing's coming to you. But here's a slice of what it could have looked like, which is we've got kind of our wetland, swampy vegetation. We've got the big trees. It's between the two valley walls, those bumpers. And seasonally, like in the winter and the spring, the water will come up, spill out over its banks into that vegetation. And then as the water would lower down later in the year, you'd have low water. So you'd have kind of more defined channels, like in August or September. Okay, what did that mean for fish? And I expect many of you are here because you might have your dream home already next to Salmon Creek, or you could close your eyes and picture what your dream home looks like. But that really meant a dream home for fish on Salmon Creek. It was placed within the swamps. We talked about those gravels that were buried down in there. That's where they like to build their nests or redds. So that's what a fish red looks like. It's kind of like a clean gravel spot. If you're walking through, this is from Salmon Creek. And places for these little juvenile baby fish to hide. So they're smaller than the size of a dollar. They're super hard to see. And if you can imagine water going really fast, that would probably freak them out. So as the water was spilling up over onto its banks, these little fish would find a nice little resting place and all that vegetation. And then those logs that fell in that Caleb was highlighting, those were good for shade and for cover, and then they would make that river bounce back around to make those, keep regenerating those new habitats that salmon liked. Okay, so that was the past. What changes has Salmon Creek seen? Thanks for asking. Okay, so we see clearing, like we talked about in that aerial before, for agricultural land use. A lot had already happened by the 50s. We zoom in on the downstream section. See that like dark area at the top of the image? Right here. So that was probably one of those wetlands, or maybe even where the main stem river channel had been. So it got moved around and vegetation got cleared. So we take a slice of that, and we look at what that would look like in cross section. All right, we've got our dream home on the top. Then we're going down, and it's starting to look a little different. We got rid of some of that vegetation that makes the nice nesting for the fish. We've still got one nice tree, and the channels on the side, we'll talk more about that. We see the dark blue doesn't come really over to the top anymore, that seasonally high water. Okay, it's similar, realigning the stream to make more space for agriculture. I grew up in a farming family, and I know if you have a creek in the middle of your property, you're not gonna wanna drive your tractor over it, so let's move the creek over. Because it'd be really hard to like jump the creek in your tractor. So if we look at our current day alignment, and then we take a drone aerial view, so we're gonna look at a drone facing upstream with this orange arrow. We talked about our bumpers. Historically, we're way out here with these dashed white lines. And actually that light blue line was the late 1800s center line. But then move the river valley over, or the river over to the valley wall. We have much smaller bowling alley. And then we have some fill and leveling related for the golf course use. So here we have that ground surface. We have the wetland black soil below the white line. And above that, we see evidence of some pea gravel was put in, help with drainage around pipes. We have some sands, want to build our fairways and our tees and our greens, nice drainage, good for mowing, way harder to mow a wetland. All right, so we went from our dream home for agriculture to now we added fill on top of that. So that blue line you can see is even further from the top of the surface. All right, so here we are today, and what does it look like? Okay, we just talked about this. The ground is a lot higher than the river flood levels. And that's, and by flood, I'm gonna say kind of annual. The river goes up and down slower in the summer than in the spring. So this keeps water moving too fast for those little fish that are less than the size of a dollar. So an analogy that a lot of folks use is this is basically created that the river for fish is now like a fire hose. And imagine that tiny little salmon trying to swim up against a fire hose. Not good. All right, trees and shrubs have been cleared. I am a golfer. It is really hard to hit through the trees, so you want to get those out of the way. So we've got cleared, and now we don't have that place for the fish to hide either, or the food to the bugs live in the grass, which lives next to the river, but that's all cleared. So the food is gone and the hiding spots are gone. Right, so ponds were dug where the channel once meandered. We've got these ponds in the floodplain here, and now it's off to the side. Those are good for irrigation for the golf course and water hazards. And then there are mapped barriers to fish passage. There's a WDFW fish passage report done recently, and so you got the kind of stoplight colors here. Green is not a barrier, so that's a bridge that fish can, they swim underneath and they're like, oh, it got dark, but then they can just keep going. Or the red is they get there and they can't swim through it all. All right, so here's a picture, just one of those. So that one's partially passable as the water comes up. Certain time of year the fish can get through it, but sometimes they can't. Okay, next one is the water is too hot, and this is for some modded species. So we put a lot of temperature loggers out here. We put 14. Whoever took those extra 2, if you want to give them back, we'd love data, we'll give you back the logger. So we have 12 left. And the red ones is where the water temperature exceeds one published threshold or how hot it is that our salmon can survive. So it's too hot for kind of the upper limit of what they can live here. Right, and then the water in the ponds is extra hot. So we'll zoom in on just the data from this one. I try not to show too many charts and graphs because I think they're super interesting. Happy to talk more about them later. But here is the temperature logger. And this red bar is that temperature limit I was talking about. That's one published threshold for above which salmon cannot survive. So it's pretty hot through there. And it was above that temperature for this particular logger 2.5 weeks during the summer. Okay, and why do ponds make the water extra hot? Well, ponds are a lot wider than the creek, so there's a lot more area for the sun to hit. And so that's just like a lot more surface for the sun to make warmer. Then those ponds get warmer, and then those are released back into the creek, which then warms up the creek downstream of those ponds. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground, maybe 15,000 years. But what can we do in the coming years to improve habitat for salmon? We've got a few tools. So here's 4 key ingredients we need to make the salmon happier. And I'm using salmon here because that's one of the primary drivers of the project, but really this is an ecological connectivity, thinking of the river as a corridor for a multitude of wildlife species. All right, we got slower water, cooler water, no barriers, more vegetation. Okay, one strategy we could use is creating areas of slower water by removing fill. The fill can be done in different areas to different extents, but what we could do is get rid of some of that sand that was placed on top of that dark wetland surface. So in certain areas, the river overtop and create that slower water again. So like a little more like our dream. Okay, we could reduce warm water inputs by filling some ponds. Why would that work? Because we would have less area exposed to the sun, and so we have less area of water heating up. We could remove barriers by removing barriers. This will tie into what Grayson's going to talk a lot about. A lot of the bridges need to be updated, and so as we update those, we can remove some of the barriers, and so fish can swim back underneath them. They'll just have that experience where like, oh, it got dark, and they'll swim right through. It'll look like this, maybe. All right, number 4 is basically the same as number 1, which is we can create areas where native trees and shrubs can grow for shade, for those nursery areas, and for large wood. Basically by removing fill so plants can keep their feet wet. Because the easiest way to grow native plants is if you can keep their feet wet, because it's hard to water stuff. You've got a garden, you know. All right, so the 4 things we talked about, 4 strategies we could use: slower water by removing fill, cooler water by filling some ponds, no barriers by removing barriers, those mapped red light, green light ones, and more vegetation by removing fill. So those are 4 tools in the toolbox that will be the foundation for what Grayson's going to talk about. So here on the base of the plans he's going to talk about are some of those strategies shown at a master planning level of how that could look for ecological connectivity as a basis for social connectivity. Pass back down.
Thanks, Emily. So before Grayson jumps in, wanted to put more context for you here. So the map Emily just showed is sort of our basis, or our base that we used when we were starting to think about how we could improve recreation here. And we just heard a lot about how fish could benefit from improvements on this property, but we could spend just as much time talking about how humans could benefit from improvements to this property. And this slide, I'm not going to read, don't worry, but it shows all the different data out there that talks about improvements to health and wellness from spending time outside. And I imagine that a lot of you already know this because you're here and you feel that this is important. So once we had the kind of idea for restoration and that basis in mind, we started looking at what do people do at the property now? And so we have some things that I'll show you here, but we may not have gotten it right. So please let us know in the survey and other places what you like doing there, what you'd like to do in the future. We've seen lots of people hiking and walking, lots of people fishing, dog walking, riding bikes, birding, and just enjoying other wildlife that come to visit the property. And then we've done a lot of other studies to help inform some of these initial concepts that we put together. We did a bridge inspection and evaluation. So we've tried to close off bridges that shouldn't really be used, but for the most part, many of the pedestrian bridges, although they're in really bad shape, they were safe. And we are doing annual inspections on some of those that are really needing to be repaired or replaced. We've done wetland delineations, soil testing and assessment, like Emily showed with the test pits, trail access review. We reviewed utilities with the city of Battleground. So there's a large utility that runs all the way through the lower half of the property. Floodplain modeling and drone imagery. So using all this information, Greenworks came up with this existing conditions map. And to orient yourself, there's a yellow icon here that shows the Cedars Public House. So that's where we are today. And if you've come to the site before, you may have parked nearby, or you may have parked off of 142nd Avenue. There's some parking off on the shoulder of the right of way. But there's not a lot of parking, and that's because the parcels that the county was able to purchase didn't include the parking lot. So that's a big gap that we acknowledge, and that's something that Grayson will touch on in his presentation. So really quickly, to give the online folks a chance to look at some of these images, I have the enlargements. So this is the most southern portion on the west side of the property. And we've included some drone imagery. The icons here that I'm highlighting are on all the enlargements, so you can kind of get a bird's eye view of this map. It's sort of hard to visualize yourself on plan view sometimes, so the drone imagery is really helpful. All of the white lines on here are the existing cart paths. Obviously, we're just using them as pedestrian trails now. The red dots are bridges. This is a picture of one of our bridges. It's in really bad shape. Then on here, there's a dashed purple line that shows a City of Battlegrounds utility that runs their property. That's one of our constraints. And here's some more drone footage matched up to the icons for you. And then on this enlargement, you can see the railroad trestle that runs through our property and over Salmon Creek. You can also see another dashed purple line, and this is a user-defined trail. It's just a trail people like to take in and out of Salmon Creek. So that's something else we noticed, was that people like to visit both properties. And then also shown on this existing site plan are the extra hot ponds that Emily mentioned. And so there's been a lot of discussion with neighbors about the ponds, and the Columbian wrote an article about the ponds. So I know some of you are here to talk about those. And so we wanted to acknowledge that. And we wanted to kind of ask the question, you know, if we don't remove the ponds, what does that mean for fish? We're certainly open to creative ideas, but we know that connecting that cold water spring that's currently feeding the ponds, we connected that directly back to Salmon Creek. We know that would improve water quality. We know that would improve fish habitat, and those are part of our goals with this project. And then lastly, this is the most northeastern part of the property. And outside of the, outside of the kind of golf course area, there's this huge wetted area shown in blue here with a lot of forest canopy. And that is all delineated as a wetland, and it's really heavily forested. So like Emily mentioned, just wanted to point that out. Okay, so now we're going to pass it off to Greenworks. Grayson Morris is a landscape architect, and he helped us come up with some concepts. So the two options that we have are not an A or B choice. Our survey actually doesn't ask you to choose one or the other, but they are showing lots of different ways that the site could be developed. And so we wanted to get kind of your feedback on these two ideas, which parts of the concept you like and which you don't.
Thanks, Evan. I haven't already told you, but hello, I'm Grayson Morris, and I'm a landscape architect. And it's okay if you don't know what that is. Myself, it's hard to tell people what a landscape architect does day to day, but this is one piece of it. I get to step in front of a crowd of wonderful people that obviously care very much about kind of their shared open spaces. So thanks for everyone showing up. Our role in this project was to respond to the earthwork and restoration effort by Influ, led by the county. And before I dive into the exact concepts, I just want to reiterate that these are really early drafts. And this is the tool that we have at our disposal to put something in front of you all and ask for your feedback about what about each concept you all prefer, comments about how things that you would change. And without any further ado, we'll just jump right into the project goals. So talked a lot about salmon habitat. My role today is to clarify what is in store for human habitat, refuge, places for rest, looking out and connecting with the creek. I've been out to the site a few times, and it's clear it's really well loved. People move around the site, they rest, they birdwatch, they connect with the space that they have, and it really is special. There's also plenty of opportunity to only improve upon that experience for everyone. So I'll list off the project goals. Enhance safety and access for all, improve trails and creek crossings, connect visitors to a healthy creek, create spaces for nature play and outdoor education, provide picnic areas and a restroom. This next slide is a precedent imagery board of recreational amenities, and probably pretty challenging, especially if you're sitting in the back to see what is in every single photo, but hopefully this just presents sort of a vision board of the general flavor of any concept that we would put in front of you that would help define a natural area, a shared open space, trails, overlooks, nature play, picnic shelters, etc. So we're gonna zoom in on a few of them, so hopefully you can see these a little bit more clearly. The park entry is intended to merge harmoniously with the site. There would be a clearly identified trailhead so that folks have a sense of arrival. They understand they've entered into a really special and beloved space. There's opportunities, with all these additional amenities and folks visiting the site, it's important that there's a restroom included at the trailhead. So think ADA parking, easy load, unload, access to a restroom, access to picnic tables, shared gathering spaces. The trail system and education, this is meant to illustrate that there are paved trails proposed, not shown are soft surface trails, similar to have out there in some areas. A trail system that would include boardwalk crossings. And this is the general scale and type of proposed pedestrian bridges. For nature play, this is something that we found to be really successful and beloved by many parents, kids, grandparents, etc. And what this board is meant to illustrate is the variety of scales that we can implement something like this. So this could be lots of small intervention or small play areas, such as log steppers, or something grand right at the trailhead. So keep that in mind. That you're going to see a lot of similarities, but the main goal here is what do you like about the scale or the type or the location, etc. And lastly, the water access and picnic areas. So on the top left, we've got direct creek access. So we've seen on the boards, some of you have asked about this already, is what do we mean by direct access? It would be you're playing in the creek, stepping across the creek on boulders, accessing the shoreline, as opposed to maybe something that's a little bit more restricted, where it's over something you're experiencing the creek by looking directly on it on the boardwalk. And last on the bottom, we have the picnic area. So would the preference be small picnic nodes throughout the entire site, or one large grand covered picnic pavilion? And I realize as I'm talking about this that it's unlikely it would be either or across the page. It's really just meant, this is a tool to gather generally what people's preferences are. And we'll work toward a preferred plan that incorporates as much of that as we possibly can. This is meant to just be a really high level summary. I think if we have to break it down by just a couple of very quick points. Option one, you can see and hear the creek, but you can't touch it. Can't really get up next to it, except from a fully accessible standpoint. Whereas option two, there'd be physical water access, multiple points where you can engage with the creek, touch the water, skip across it, play in the creek. Option one, we illustrate and propose several small amenities, such as the nature play that we talked about, or the picnic areas. Whereas option two would be fewer and larger, grander amenities, centrally located at the trailhead. This is probably hard to read. It's this long, meandering site. It was an absolute nightmare for a landscape architect to illustrate on a single board. We had to break it into enlargements. I'm sure you've seen those around the room. There are a lot of boards up for that reason. And those are bounded in this white dot box. And so I'll flip through the enlargements, moving from the southwest corner to the northeast corner. And we'll just talk about how to read these graphics. So we're at the first enlargement of option one. In red, you see the hard surface trails. Nice. Okay, I just discovered the laser. But existing hard surface trails are here. But then that links up with the paved parking lot. It's the trailhead, and it may be difficult to see on a projector screen, but we've highlighted in these sort of golden halos some of the amenities that were then pulling up a precedent image so you know exactly what we're talking about. You know, pictures worth 1,000 words here. So we've highlighted that there may be an overlook as opposed to a direct creek access, or there may be small log steppers, or there's some smaller nature play elements sprinkled through the site here at the trailhead and beyond. What else? Salmon Creek is in dark blue, the main channel. This lighter blue has been asked about. This would be the inundated areas, the sites, the low sites that would be flooded during heavy rain events. And we've also got some dark green vegetation here that indicates maybe some sort of canopy, whether it's dense vegetation or a clearing below, but a forest canopy above. There's some habitat near the creek in the low levels. And then there's this golden color here that would be a meadow, and this lighter green shade that would just be sort of a cleared open area. So we're going to go through key differences as I flip through quickly, and we're illustrating that this is similar across both options, though. There'd be boardwalk crossings. Again, the trail in this red, and you can see, as we illustrated in the past slide, the main channel as well as the side channels. And so again, the plans are meant to respond to the proposed grading, how to get people up, around, connect to the creek. Key difference for option one is that there would not be parking proposed on 181st Street. The key difference here, for option one, is that there would not be a proposed off-surface trail through the floodplain. So all of the trails would be hard surface and they would stay up at a higher elevation. Option one, we're proposing a forward walk and an overlook. It would be this really stellar view that would look out over the floodplain. And a quick skim through option two to highlight those key differences. My job here today is to make sure you fully understand. You look at these boards, what's different about it. So again, difficult to read. We'll get into the enlargements. Option two is about direct water access. It's about fewer, larger amenities, like a larger picnic shelter and a larger nature play. All of this located centrally at the trailhead, fully accessible. Important to note that we're also showing all current and potential future neighborhood connections. This is meant to stoke a conversation. Nothing about this is final. We're doing our best to illustrate what opportunities are out there on site, what people love about it now, how can we enhance it, make it better for you. Option two does show a parking lot with the ADA spots and load and unload area at 181st and another trailhead and nature play. Something special about option two presents this overlook and interpretive area, sort of tucked back, looking back at the Crustal Bridge. And a key difference here in option two is the trail linking visitors through the floodplain, which would be seasonally available. This is the area that's going to flood. So as you can imagine, if it floods, you won't be able to walk on the bridge. But you still get a fantastic loop at the end, year round, with an overlook, stellar view down the floodplain. And again, most of the year, the seasonal trail would be available for use, but it would seasonally not be available as they flood. So, and that would mean the site's doing exactly what it was designed to do. So I won't go through all this. You can read it while I recap. Option one, see and hear the creek. Option two, touch, walk through, play in the creek. Option one, several small amenities such as picnic areas and nature play. And option two, single large shelter, single large playground. And that's just about all I have for you. And hopefully that was easy enough to digest, a lot to cover. And thanks for hanging in there with us. I'll hand it back to Ellen.
Thanks, Grayson. All right. Next steps. Well, the planning process is a multi-year process, and so it's just the beginning. We want your feedback. So we are going to have people walk around with paper copies of the survey, but we also have a little slip of paper with a QR code and website, so you can get to the survey and take it at home. You can pass it to your neighbor, you can pass it to your friend. And the last thing that we're going to give you is this half sheet. It's a comment and question card. So if you don't get your question answered today, or you don't feel comfortable talking into the mic, or you'd rather talk with us on the phone sometime or in person at a later date, you can fill out that comment card and one of us will get back to you. Okay, so with that, we have a lot of people here tonight, so we have to have some ground rules. We will only be able to handle one question per person. So please try to keep it brief if you can. We know it's a complicated site, but we do want to try and get through as many questions as we can tonight.
Hello.
Yeah, I think that's about it. I'm going to hand the mic over to Ross Hoover, our Parks and Nature Division Manager.
Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you all again for listening to that presentation. Many of you arrived early and checked out the boards and took a good look at the design ideas and the existing conditions. Shows that you care, shows that you want to be here and you want your voice heard. And that's what this whole night is about, but it's not just tonight. As Evelyn mentioned, there's a survey, you can fill that out, leave it with us tonight. You can email us, you can call us. Hearing from you is absolutely vital. And so I just want to emphasize a couple of things before we jump into questions. And that is, first of all, if you thought this was pretty cool and you want to figure out how you can get more involved in the county and what happens at the county, there are a whole bunch of boards and committees and commissions that you can be a part of. And you can just check out the Clark County website and find one that you like or are interested in and get really involved in what's happening in Clark County. So we wanted to make sure you all knew about that. And then second, this site is really unique and special. I can tell that's why you bought your house, or the reason you live nearby is because of the uniqueness of this location. We also recognize that at the county. And so our Legacy Lands programs purchased the land along with Clean Water, our Clean Water division. And the whole purpose of Legacy Land and Clean Water is so that we can restore that site back to its original as we can get, and improve the salmon habitat and the natural habitat of that area. And so we're doing this work all over the county. Many waterways we have acquired and restored the waterway to try to make a home for those species that call this place home. So that's what we're up to. So just wanted to review that again with you, and glad you're here. Happy to answer questions, and we will get the right expert to answer those questions. And once again, if you don't feel like speaking, it's totally fine. You can shoot us an email or call us after the meeting.
We actually have comment cards. If you don't feel comfortable speaking in person, just come and see us. They're also on the table in the back. Who'd like to go first? And as she said, it's one question at a time. Thank you.
Thank you. The parking lot location off of 142nd and the playground area, I'm very concerned because Cedars Heights, I think it is, across the street is where densely packed homes with a lot of children. 142nd is posted at 50 miles an hour with a drop away hillside at Cedar Drive. No control on those intersections at Cedar Drive at 42nd, and you're creating a dangerous nuisance for children that are going to be crossing 142nd all summer long on their bikes to come to the play area. What consideration was given to that? And as an aside, battlegrounds, 2 words.
Thank you. And everybody heard the question?
Yeah, Jane, I want to recognize Jane for going first. Thank you, Jane. I also wanted to mention, we are capturing your comments, your thoughts, and your opinions, and your questions. We've got folks over here also monitoring online questions, so I just want to make sure you do that, capturing, so we can follow up with a more specific answer. Do you have an answer to Jane's question?
So at this stage, it's very preliminary. I think you're spot on, and maybe you had a past job as a city planner. I'm just kidding. Yes, it is absolutely critical that we address that with our partners at City of Battleground before we open anything up. I agree.
I can say that we'll go through a land use planning process when we actually do actual design. Right now, we're talking about concepts for park planning. But when we go through the land use process, we'll have to do traffic studies to study how people are going to be coming to the park. And at that time, we'll talk about crosswalks and other safe traffic and pedestrian. Here we go, Tony.
Hi, I'm Tony. This is probably more of a project management question, but usually in a presentation like this, I'm used to seeing something that starts with the full life cycle of what you have planned, and maybe something with some milestones that says, here's where we are today, here's where we expect to be in a year, here's when the project will be breaking ground, here's when we hope to be completed, based on funding, sources, things like that. Can you kind of highlight any of that at this point?
At this point, we do not have funding locked in, so we don't have a schedule or a timeline. we had this opportunity with the tribe to, work on preliminary design. So for them, this is a 30% design for the, river floodplain reconnection. The county, we typically have to, find funding, put it in our capital improvement plan. And then we'd have a real set timeline. So at this point, we're still in the process of developing that.
So we have a 6-year capital plan that we update annually, and so far the actual development of this property or the project is not on that capital plan. We hope that it will be.
From a funding perspective, this site, because of its unique nature and the fact that there's a restoration work happening on this site, significant restoration work, that this site will likely be eligible and will probably receive significant grant funding from the state level outside of Clark County. So this project will bring funds into the county to invest here.
Yeah, my name is Doug Arndt. The driving force behind this project seems to be salmon steelhead habitat restoration. When can we see the details, what actually involved, specifically changing channels, taking away ponds? When do we see all that, and what are the metrics for measuring the success of that effort?
Thanks for that question. So right now, the salmon habitat restoration, the receipt funds, as Ross mentioned, from Surfport to take it through 30% design by the end of this year. So right now we're at a master planning concept level. They feed that in, and I go permit level design is usually like a 75%. So that's not funded, not planned right now. So the 30% design that will, if it continues forward, will be available later this year or next year.
Hi. What, I guess, big picture question, when you come in and get rid of the ponds, these ponds will become home to waterfowl, there's turtles, there's all kinds of, I assume, the deer come down and use these ponds. What the hell happens to all that wildlife?
Great question. Yeah, we're in the restoration of the creek. Yeah, the health of the salmon will require removing ponds. That heat source that's dumping warm water, hot water into the cool creek. Yes, there will be species changes, and maybe you can talk a little bit about what we're doing.
Sure. Thank you for that question. So some ponds may be filled if the restoration effort is forward because it's focused on grant funding was for salmon. And there are warm waters talked about in the presentation, which is getting into the creek. There are passage barriers that are mapped by WHW, which is part of what brought this funding in. So those fish can't get up to those areas that they've historically accessed. However, floodplain will bring back. So the ponds will be considered as we go forward and look for feedback on how people use different ponds. And going forward, we anticipate that, salmon are funded. Salmon are identified as a keystone species. That's because they're an indicator of the health of other species that utilize that same landscape. So while there's a lot of talk about salmon, we know that what's good for salmon is good for other wildlife in the area. So cougar, deer, birds eat salmon. So those other species, this is really an ecological connectivity piece. The money comes from salmon dollars, so that's why there's a lot of discussion on them. But there are some ponds that are more fish barriers and more water sources than others. So they can put feedback on you all this, what wildlife have you seen out there? Now we're in situations towards 30% design for the both units.
Add one more thing to that. From my understanding, the Cowlitz tribe just removed a dam on, well, I'm not sure about the river, Justin, but they recently removed a dam where they had to, take a survey and inventory of all the wildlife that was living in the lake, right? And then remove those species in an environmentally sensitive way. So there wasn't any displacement of wildlife. That would all be up to environmental code and regulations. There's a standard way to do that.
You mentioned that funding might be an issue, and I was wondering, what will what's that? Oh, right, it's over there. Okay. What role do wetland credits purchased by developers play in funding this project?
I don't know that there, I don't know that there were any or that there weren't any at this site. But that could potentially be something that could be utilized if it was. Something we could look into. Thanks for that comment.
Can I ask a quick question? Are you asking about development of the houses around here?
Are you asking about wetland credits for this project development? So we would use real estate excise tax, I believe, and park improvement funds, which are two different types of tax revenue that have nothing, they have to do with developers and the development of land that's set aside for this area.
So I'm a developer and I helped build Richfield National Wildlife Refuge. And there was funding that we used between state partners and federal partners to build that park. And I was wondering if you guys were aware that you could access funds that way.
Not one of us, but probably some other people on our team who are not here right now, but thank you. Let's talk later.
I have one person over there, but I'm gonna stop here.
Hi, is this working? So is there some, and to be just diminishing, is there some actual data that shows that this kind of restoration actually does improve salmon populations? And how long does it usually take before the development is completed to see any improvements that are measurable and helpful?
Great question. So there is, Justin, do you want to answer? I'm not a fisheries biologist, I'm a geomorphologist, so I'm gonna give it to the fisheries biologist.
I'm not a fisheries biologist exactly either. I'm a half and half, so jack of all trades. But what I would say is it's going to take some time. It's a process in terms of salmon life cycle and
The rest of the question on how long it's gonna take.
I can answer the restoration like recovery question, but.
yeah, I mean, in terms of
Data.
I don't have the fish data. We're gonna talk to Pete Barber. He's the fish biologist on this. But it's definitely a process that it's gonna take multiple years. But in terms of Salmon Creek being kind of a stronghold with respect to coho, it's already producing. And so if you build it, they will come, to use that basic statement. So I think that's where we start. And this is the process, and that's where we want to begin, because it's an excellent opportunity in terms of the size and the way the site is laid out.
Yeah, I think you speak to like general restoration site recovery, so usually there is a lot of disturbance as part of the project, like removing that fill would be a lot of grading, you see like a lot of big field machines or so that. And then there would be a lot of active replanting, which takes time, it's like kind of stewarding your garden, stewarding landscape. So planting would happen, and then we're trying to set the elevation so that as the river floods, that like natural vegetation will come as well. And so you have active plants, and then a site usually go through kind of these awkward teenage years, which is like 3 to 5 months, like a little scraggly, these little shrubs. And then over time, we start to get more forested canopy, and then harder to tell that that restoration project is actually occurred. So we can get you some more specific fish numbers, but that's what we play about trajectory.
And the county has another property on Salmon Creek, the Salmon Creek Greenway Trail where BGSA fields are. And there's a group that's just applied for a grant to study fish on that portion of the river where we've done a lot of that restoration work. The floodplain there meanders back and forth. I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about. There's tons of birds and wildlife there. So I think we get more information specifically about Salmon Creek, hopefully in the next few years.
I'm a little bit confused about the ponds, and the reason I say that is, the graph that they showed. The graph that they showed, showed the temperatures high in the summer months. But as far as I can tell, those ponds are very isolated from the creek in those summer months. For the most part, right? Or it could be, right? So does it really impact the salmon if it's only flooding in the winter months when it's quite cold?
That's a great question. And yes, they do increase the temperature of the main stem. We put a number of waters upstream and downstream of the main stem, so you can see an increase that's in the main stem of the Salmon Creek. It's cooler upstream of the pond inlet, or near the pond inlet, and then warmer just downstream of that. We pulled some of that data in through the late summer months, so it was also useful in the summer and fall.
There's a lot of groundwater movement in this low area. And so even though you can't see water overtopping the top of the ponds, there's a lot of connectivity between them and the creek. Thank you for that question.
In regards to the pond, temperature reading you guys took. Can you guys, share that data, or you took those temperature readings, when it was, what day? Everything else that's going on that side?
Yes, all of our information is public, and if you write down your email address on our comment card, we can send that to you. If you do want to make a comment, ask a question, give me a little eye contact and I'll come your way. Yes, I'd like to know, with not even really knowing when the return or the breaking of the steelhead and salmon flow would be, why are they the only priority in this project at the sacrifice body of the wildlife and waterfowl used pond? Why couldn't they be dredged and trenched to feed into it for flow, and turning on possibly the pumps that are already existing to aerate the water during those times that they didn't form? I mean, there are other solutions that it seems to me might be viable for everything that uses the area, rather than just salmon and steelhead, which I'm all for, but the return is going to be slow, more than likely. And, you know, the numbers could be very minuscule for a long time. The sacrifice for a lot of other athletes down there.
Great question. Yeah, so as we talked about just a minute ago, that there will be a period of disturbance, and the animals, critters will not be in the area likely during that period. Over time, what you see at restoration sites is everything comes back, and comes back at a higher scale than previously. And so the sites that I have been a part of developing and have seen throughout my career, the wildlife becomes more vibrant when the site is restored. And so it is, but you're right, there is a period of displacement during construction and shortly after.
Wait a second.
I'm Karen. I have a totally different question. I don't know if you can the answer right now, but when everything is said and done, and you know, the park opens, question is there certain hours in which it's in operation and then it will be shut down? Because I just know it could be a spawning ground for a lot of homeless people, and that's a concern for this neighborhood.
Great question. Yes. So we have regular operating hours, daytime hours. And so those are the use times throughout the park system. We have 111 sites around the county. Some of them are just natural areas. Some of them are active. Softball, baseball, football fields. And all of the parks have the same standard. And folks that are using our parks in the incorrect way, you can call our sheriff's office to have that dealt with. And the county is actively working provide services to folks, provide housing to folks. So there's sort of two things happening at the same time.
Hi, kind of along the same lines as that question. There's a lot of wooded area in this, section, and the development is very long and skinny. For properties that are more towards 167, what prevention for fires, do you guys have? Are there hydrants out there? If something starts on the east side, how do you put that out?
Great question. So in our natural areas, what we typically do is, we will mow a swath around private residences, and we will create this, essentially a fire break. We'll cut down the tall grasses in those areas. All the development areas have hydrants. And I don't know specifically what, the plans will show in the park, but that's certainly something we'll consider.
Over here.
I'm just curious, the two options, one seemed to be more look at the creek, away from it, and the other like access for people to the creek. What is, it doesn't seem to me like people getting them would be good for fish, but I'm curious why that was presented as an option, does it not really affect the fish?
Okay, great question. So people are drawing water, which is why we live next to it, why we play next to it, when I get down in there. And having a well-designed access to the creek and areas where we encourage people to get down there is great because that directs them in that area, and then areas further upstream where there's not direct access is less people, and fewer people walking in on it. So it's well designed and well written because people are gonna watch the water. And we want to make our own trails so that they're well designed trail, business you can do, then it's directed to more areas, it doesn't disturb the whole here.
Yes, I'm curious where you got the numbers, where you do your fish counts on those coho numbers, and I'm assuming that the fish are, you guys have access to this area, but what happens downstream from here is up, wide open where the fish can migrate up, and how far they go. Yeah,
Doesn't the WFW residents state?
Segments, the reaches based on topography, slope of the gradient and whatnot, and so you can find that data on WFW, it's done surveys and the Fred survey, just see, they've walked those reaches typically. And it's not done annually all the time, it depends on what the WFW has funding for, but those are available public. We talked to the local WFW file.
You can, so the question is about fish counts and where those came from, and Justin said they came from WDFW, Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. So they have counts, through all Washington state, I think that website, like Stream Habitat Mapper. But we can send out, I don't think we can send out that link, but it has data about what types of fish are in which stream, how many different reds there are, how many types of fish are counted each year. And then also those barriers that were shown, the traffic light barriers, you can see the maps of those. If you want to zoom in on the property to, if you Google WDFW barriers, that will come up. There's also a lot of good data, fish counts data about kind of returns after a dam or barrier is removed from other projects. So we try and pull that.
You knew I was gonna ask a hard question.
Here, one of the big things.
Great. I actually have a slightly different question. We sometimes hear in the park here, there are quad runners, trail runners, motorized bikes and things of that nature. Who would we go to basically stop it?
Thank you. Yes, this is, So the space is in a in-between phase right now. It's definitely not a golf course anymore, but it's definitely not a natural area park either. And so the infrastructure to serve that and make it more difficult isn't in place either. So bollards, barricades, you can't get a vehicle through. Some of them are small, some of them are e-bikes. And e-bikes can be challenging to regulate and manage. And so, when and if you see those at the site, call the sheriff's office and let them know. And the sheriff's office will log that data. They will see where the hot spots are, where they're having particular problems, and they will focus on that area and that problem. So this is a challenge on streets as well. And we definitely want this to be a safe space. So we'll build those pieces of infrastructure into the design.
I'm gonna make a quick comment, really quick. There's an issue with the handouts that we gave you for the QR codes for the online survey. They're not working. Like the QR code on the screen in front of you works, and also they have a link to the website where you can also access the survey. If you type into Google or your favorite browser, Gordy, Jolma Family Natural Area, it's gonna bring it up and you'll be able to find all the handouts from tonight and also the survey.
I'm curious, oh, go ahead.
I was just wondering how many ponds they're talking about filling in.
That's a great question. There's a range of options. We don't have a set number. There are a couple, if you look at that temperature data, that are giving more warm water and into the stream. And then there are a couple that have those fish barriers blocking off the full spring and tributary habitat that Evelyn mentioned earlier. So if there was a prioritization based on habitat, it would probably follow what's giving off the most warm water and where are those barriers to this passage getting after those, but still open for discussion and feedback.
I was just going to throw out a prompt, and that is, would love to also hear your feedback on the amenities in the park. What type of play structures, picnic shelters, the trails themselves. One of the things was mentioned earlier is that we want this to be accessible so that my mother uses a walker. She doesn't go places where there's gravel. So surface material. I want to kind of hear some of that stuff from you as well, and it'll help inform kind of the next phase of development work or design work.
This is somewhat related to the ponds you mentioned, because I heard there was emphasis on some ponds will be filled. And I remember we had a conversation last, you were saying all of them are connected to the salmon through underwater pipes or clay tiles. So I was curious, which ones will it be?
Yeah, I would reiterate, we have not picked which ponds are gonna get filled. There are some that are warmer and more connected, but yes, all of them are connected because you remember that test pit fill, there's gravel in there, so water seeps through there and is connected, but you can see from the temperature days, which ones are warmer, so. There is one pond that's owned by the city of stormwater, and that's a stormwater treatment area, and that's a separate pond.
And the answers sometimes we're giving you are not direct. They might be ambiguous answers, and there's a reason for that. What we presented tonight were two concepts, two ideas, two different versions for you to riff off of and give us thoughts about. And the same is true for the water quality and salmon habitat improvement. It's early stage design work. And so that's why we're coming to you at this stage. And so when we give you an answer that's uncertain, that's why. It's specifically to hear from you. And so we can use your feedback to in the next phase.
Okay, I think we have about 15 minutes left in the space. So and we'll keep asking questions. If we don't have time for your question, but you want to ask one, let me know when I come by and I'm happy to hand one of these out to you. But make sure you hand them to us before you leave. And if you have your surveys completed, you can hand those to me too, and I'll make sure they turn in.
At one time, there was a lot of talk about Rosenbach's being the railroad, Chalachi Railroad, and bringing aggregate in and boarding. Is that still in the works, and how is that going to affect the park?
Danielle Cowley, would you mind coming up for a railroad question? The question was whether or not, the idea of bringing gravel up the railroad is still active. Is that kind of your question?
Yeah, it's still a thing. That's a good question. It is currently not, the rail is not the right way to do that. Okay, and scale. So, not right now. They're going to do rails to trails. The rail to trail concept has been done. There's one section closer to the Battle Lake State Park. It's 1 mile. There's an intention to try to do some more of that. But it's a funding issue too, so.
Yeah.
It's nothing scripted.
I think there's a regional trail plan that shows that, but there's not funding in place to construct it.
So, sorry, while we're going through all of this, I know there are a lot of us that live back here off of the 152nd branch. And there is a spot on that map that I see that can kind of connect from part of the neighborhood to 142nd and Grace Avenue. Just like right over there. I know several people have supplemental coverage for when we had a tree down there or anything, and like nobody in this back area can actually have an egress exit out. Would there be a potential to get something on either side, you know, east or west, so that we're not just kind of landlocked back here, because emergency services are also barred from entry?
That's a great question. It's something we will look into specifically. And if you come see me after, I'll give you my card today.
I think if you also leave the comment here and then on the survey as well, that'd be great.
If you're talking about the right of way, the city of Battleground has indicated that the connection to, I think, is it 162nd? They don't have any plans to connect that at this time.
So I live in the New Cedars Landing development, and one of my big concerns, there's a bunch, but we have access to go down through the park and a little driveway that goes back down through. Is that, I know it's early in the stages, you probably don't have the answer, but definitely having the construction equipment going through our neighborhood and then down out the top side is not ideal. When they redid the course before the sale, you know, everything came off of where the proposed parking lot is. And all that land was just, it was pretty tattered from all the equipment. So is there a plan? I know that the county has an easement, you know, up until our neighborhood, but to use that driveway in Cedars Landing neighborhood that comes back with equipment, is that part of the plan? Am I explaining that correctly?
No, that's great feedback. We're not that far along yet to think about access points construction. But absolutely, what you described, we've captured. We will be looking at the least impactful access points for construction and equipment.
And when we get to design, we'll have we go through land use, we'll have another meeting and we'll be sharing those designs with you, and we can share all those same concerns at that time when we're planning our construction activity.
My concern is mostly, understandably with the salmon. But for public safety, like this gentleman said, option 2 has parking up here. There's many houses up here. We have one way in, one way out. And bringing more people up into this area on 152nd is not wise in anybody's book. And I guess I'm giving you my opinion. I really don't want to be remembered with thoughts and prayers. I'm sure all of us that live up here don't. So you please, my question is, so when you do that traffic study that's in the future, will that be given consideration for the lives that live up here?
Yeah, that's great feedback, and what we want, this is what we want to hear tonight.
We have about 9 minutes left.
Live along the edge and making this into a floodplain, is that gonna affect homeowners insurance? Being this close to a flood area, when you change it from a creek to a floodplain?
Great question. No, because as part of our design, we cannot increase the water surface elevation of the mapped flood. So, as we continue through design, we do a drought model to make sure that that doesn't go up. We are an engineering firm, so our first priority is protection of infrastructure and human health and safety. First, priority. So, thank you.
Just one more reminder to turn in your surveys if you have a paper copy, we're going to take them.
Mine's less of a question and more of a comment. When you responded to homeless and issues and, to call and ask for help, looking at Bird Bridge, it's a nightmare over there, right? And I would hate to see that up here. So just saying how we have services and call for help. If that happens up here, it's not that easy, right? There's a lot more to it than just say call for help. So I just want to be really cognizant of that, and bringing that up here would be a huge impact. Thank you.
Anybody else? Also still have the handwritten ones if you, oh, sorry, want a handwrite question? Nobody else?
So just a comment, hopefully it ends up being coherent, but yeah, I knew this place when it was a golf course. It was beautiful, pristine, and so forth. And like you said earlier, we're halfway in between, I walk that and I do enjoy seeing the, the geese and so on. But I see a overgrown golf course. So I don't, I wouldn't say that probably the community would prioritize salmon as the thing to prioritize, but I understand that's a source of the funding, and hopefully that can be a leverage, a way to convert this to be, the trees are beautiful and stuff, but it's still an overgrown golf course. So I think that's part of something that we all need to get our heads wrapped around, that it would be beneficial to change it. Then the question is how to balance that with everybody's individual status.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I apologize if some of the comments I didn't quite catch, but I would like to reiterate a couple of that I did hear up here as far as the concern about 152nd Avenue having no proper egress in case of emergencies, because I do happen to live on that end. And I felt firsthand when trees come down, road is blocked, power lines come down, people without power. So safety is a major concern. Two, concern about the neighborhoods being affected by on-street parking. If I correctly looked at the on-site maps, it seems that there are several trail accesses that come close to the neighborhood. And my concern is that if people are not able to park down here on 142nd Avenue, I don't know what capacity is going to be, or if that's even figured out yet. Will there be kind of traffic study that will try and put a label on how much additional traffic we'll see on 152nd Avenue or some of those other egresses into neighborhoods that will be affected, and on-street parking, which may be a problem?
Oh, well, a traffic study would look at the actual uses that are determined during design, and they would try to estimate the number of trips that will come from anything that's added to the park. And then that will determine the number of parking spaces that are required, and impact whether or not there could be a signal, which most likely be a signal here, stop sign, crosswalks, things like that.
How is this space? If we were to meet again in the future, is this a good space? Not, it's okay or not good? Good? I'm seeing mostly thumbs up. It's a little crowded, I would say. It's my assessment. Not many options though. Yeah, yeah. Well, we really thank you all for being here. You all stayed until the very end. And so thank you for your interest, for sharing your concerns, your thoughts. When do we go to the next meeting? Ideas. Next meeting?
The next meeting, I think, will be after we've had a chance to collect feedback from this meeting and developed a preferred alternative. So I think we would ideally like to do that this year sometime, so likely in the fall.
And once that preferred concept is put together, there'll be a plan that's developed, and that will go through a review process as well. And so there'll be an opportunity for public comment through the review process as it gets to be adopted by the county council.
Any other thoughts?
Maybe since there's so many different neighborhoods that are being affected by this process, maybe you could have 2 meetings because of the parking and because of the limited seating, the number of people that tried to come, and we already had to break it into 2 sessions. I'm lucky I got to sit down here at the end, so.
Good idea. Great idea, thank you.
We'll definitely have a debrief after this, and we'll come up with a plan for the next meeting.
Just a comment, there's been several people that have mentioned 157, which is Cedars Landing. There's 2 more areas that they're adding more houses to in there. So there's more neighbors in that area. One way in, one way out.
Thank you.
Just one comment. Once you get it built, I just want to make sure the county understands that we really appreciate it if you maintain it. So far, the park as it currently stands, I understand it's been passively approached, but there's been very little work done to make it usable for those of us who continue to use it. So if we could make sure it gets money allocated in the budget to maintain it after it's built, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
We also work with our maintenance staff to better understand their capabilities too, and they have input.
And to add to that is make sure that it continues to be usable throughout the construction process, right? So not having long periods of time where it's inaccessible.
One more from?
I see the county owns the property on 183rd Street towards 167th Avenue. There's already an access road that goes almost to 167th, which would be the perfect place to put being